welcome to the Shatter the Stereotypes podcast. I'm your host, Coach Michael Taylor. And the intention of this podcast is to highlight men of color who are doing amazing things in the world. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models. So the intention is to shine the light on some of the men of color out there who are making a positive contribution to their communities and the world at large. And so joining me today is a gentleman who's doing just that. His name is Michael Christian Woods, and he's actually running to be the next mayor of Washington, D.C.
Yes,
So
yes, I am.
Definitely shattering the stereotypes, and I'm really excited about having him on the show. So hello, Michael, and welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm good, and thank you for having me.
Well, again, I'm really excited to have you on the show, and you are definitely shattering the stereotypes. So it is my privilege to interview you and talk about your aspirations and dreams of being the next mayor of Washington, D.C. But before we do that, I want to ask you a couple of icebreaker questions just to let people get to know you a little bit. So first of all, I got to start with asking, how old are you?
I am 19 years old.
19 years old. So that's a great place to start because you got to start dreaming early. So I'm really excited that as a young Black male, you're taking these steps to make a positive contribution in the world. So that's awesome. So tell us where you're from.
I was born in Louisiana, and we moved to Texas when I was around 3 or 4. So that's where I've grown up for most of my life. And then I moved out here around 2-3 years ago.
And so you're currently in D.C.?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your parents and your family, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, they've always been supportive and always pushed me to dream big and really be the best I can be as a person. And I really attribute my aspirations, my motivation to them, because they always told me that, here's a little Southern phrase for you, an idle mind's the devil's workshop. So they wanted me always doing something in the community, some type of work, something academically, to make sure that I was becoming more of a well-rounded person and well-rounded individual. So I really do appreciate everything they've done for me. They've been supportive, especially now that I'm running for mayor of DC. They've been super supportive, encouraging, and just pushing me to dream big again, and then to not be afraid, again, to reach out to something that may seem unattainable, like mayor of DC, to really push for it. And if you have a dream, like they say, where there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely. So where do you go to school now?
I am currently a rising senior at George Washington University.
Okay. And what are you studying there?
I'm currently studying political science, Africana studies, with a minor in sociology.
And now I'd like for you to name a woman who inspires you.
This might sound a little cliche, but I would say my mother. And that's okay. My mom's really been there for me. They say we look like twins. If you ever see a picture of us together, you'll know. But she's always been there at the forefront, especially working hard, making sure that what I'm doing and that I'll have the support system that I need, and that really throughout my life, she's really been there for me, especially my dad too. They both, well, you said woman, but I'll give a little bit of appreciation to my father too. They've really been a very big support to me. I can't say it enough how much of a support system, encouragement they have done to really push me forward.
Great. So outside of your dad, name a male role model that you look up to.
Well, everyone does say I look like former President Obama. So, but yes, I do look up to him a lot. I really enjoyed him as a president, and I appreciated how he held his composure through all the criticism, through everything. He still stood strong and really represented us as a African-American race and as a people. And I really do appreciate him for that. And I would say he is my biggest role model other than my father.
Nice. Now, Name a book that has had a positive impact on your life.
Ooh, a book. Well, I'll throw in a little plug here. I co-authored a book, so I would say that had a positive impact on my life.
Absolutely.
But that really did, because the book is Swag Diaries, and what it stands for is Students with A+ Grades. And what it is I co-authored it. It was over a speech I did that encouraged students, especially high school students and teens, to do the best they can do academically, to strive for academic excellence and social integrity. And that really, through that process of going through meeting people and seeing how I, in a way, touched their lives or made a difference in their life, it really inspired me and touched me to want to keep making a difference in people's lives. And that's what pushed me to run for mayor. So I would say that would be one of the biggest books, or the book that had the biggest impact on my life.
And what is that title again?
Swag Diary, Students with A+ Grades.
Nice, nice, very nice. Now, if you like movies, name a movie that you love.
Ooh, there's a lot. You know what? The first one that I'll name, the first one that I really like that popped in my mind was The Help. I will always quote that phrase, "You is kind, you is smart, you is important." That is the most iconic phrase. I love saying that. So I love that movie. So that would be the one that I would say.
Okay. So you're taking on a pretty important role in attempting to be mayor.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're still a youngster. So what do you do for fun?
Ooh, for fun. Okay. I watch videos. That's what I do. Like, in the time I have, that's what I like to do, is watch Netflix videos, YouTube videos. That's usually what I do in my free times.
Okay.
Well,
Now, there are some people who are pretty pessimistic about the future, and there's others who are very, very optimistic. So as a millennial, where do you fall on the spectrum between optimism and pessimism for the future in general?
for the future in general,
Yeah.
I have an optimism that people as myself, more millennials, will step up and try to be a difference and make the change. Because as I always quote, attitude determines your altitude. So you have to have a positive attitude, I feel, in order for things to get done. So I would say I'm optimistic of the future, that if not myself, someone else or other people will try to change it and make it for a positive future and a more better future for us all.
Okay. All right, good. Now, I want you to imagine that I'm going to give you a magic wand. And with this magic wand, you can create anything you want to create. Now, using this magic wand, what would your life look like 20 years from now?
Anything I would want to create. I mean, near perfect. If there's anything I wanted to create, I mean, I would, to be honest, if I could create anything, make myself a little billionaire, trillionaire, create myself a little island, live there in comfort, to be completely honest with you.
Okay, I'm gonna start calling you Richard Branson now. Okay, now let's talk a little politics.
Mm-hmm.
So you've decided to run to be the next mayor of Washington, D.C. Why did you decide to run?
There's a lot of aspects that played into why I wanted to run. I'll go through. The first one would be my experience with the NAACP Washington, D.C. branch that I interned in last summer, and also my current involvement with the GW NAACP. And I would say it really opened my eyes to a lot of the issues that are going on within D.C., like the affordable housing crisis that we worked on with the NAACP Washington, D.C. branch, and food deserts that we were working on with the GW NAACP. It really just inspired me to want to make a difference, want to make a change. And I would say that ties also into, I feel that DC, we have a lot of conversation, but not a lot of action. And it's become more, especially politics, has become more of bashing the other side and more of every man versus each other instead of working together and actually finding a solution to these problems. And that made me want to run to be the person to change, the person who will incite the change, incite the action, to make sure especially that people whose voices aren't heard are being heard, especially with millennials. You know, the stigma around us that we don't care about the current state of affairs, that we're not involved, we're not doing this, that I'm really trying in the process to break that stigma, that showing that we really do care, that we want to make a difference, and leading by example to show others that you don't have to be afraid. If you have something you're passionate about, an issue you want to do, solve, an issue you want to fix, that you are given that voice, that you aren't afraid to get out and stand for something. And that's one of the main things that pushed me to run for mayor, to be this example so that others can see, wow, he's running for mayor of DC, like unprecedented, especially a 19-year-old, that maybe I can too. I've seen so many people have come up to me. It's like, well, you're running for mayor, I can run for mayor too. And I'm like, why not? We need more people to get involved and to make sure. And I feel like leading by example that we can do that, so we can all work together to make a positive impact and a positive change.
Now, you mentioned Barack Obama as a role model. And so let's see, you're 19. So you're probably what, 9 or 10 years old when he was first elected president? So do you remember that event?
I do. I remember, because this was back when I was in Texas, but we had family out here, so we would especially visit a lot. I remember the inauguration. I was in 5th grade. I remember that we got a week to ourselves, and we went to the inauguration. It was cold outside. That's all I remember. It was cold, and we walked past this sign of President Obama. There was a little cutout of him that someone was selling like pictures for. Very, very efficient economically, but I just remember my parents and all the people that surrounded us being so happy. So, like, especially with the first Black president, just a sense of pride within the Black community. I say that now. I didn't realize that back then. I just saw people walking around, but now I see it was like, wow, we've made it. We now have a Black man representing us as president of the United States. And that's really what I see now, was like the atmosphere and the attitude of the people who surrounded me.
Now, I noticed that on your site, you use a slogan that you say, always forward. And that has a Barack Obama feel to it. You know, he was about change, but you're saying always forward. So talk a little bit about why that's important to you. What do you mean by always forward?
Yes. When coming up with the campaign slogan, always forward popped in my head, and the reasoning behind it was really, I can't remember the quote exactly that I heard. It went something like, never look back unless you're seeing how far you came, or something to that sort. And that was really what I am envisioning with my campaign, and that we're forward looking. Always forward being looking into the future. Everything we do now has some impact in the future. So we're present day. Anything we do present day, we're trying to have a positive impact in the future, no matter how tiny, how large the action may be. And that's what was really the reasoning behind that, is always forward, always looking forward. Don't look back unless you see how far you come. And it's just always about positive progress towards a better future for DC.
Yeah, that's a great slogan. Great slogan. Now, I believe there's a frustration in our society as a whole. And I think a lot of it has to do with the current presidency. And there's just so much division and frustration towards politics and politicians. So as mayor, what do you think you can do to sort of bridge that divide and remove some of the frustration that people are feeling as a result of our current presidency?
Okay. I would say the frustration really is not only with our president, but with a lot of elected officials locally, within our states and federally, is that they say they're going to do stuff and then end up going into office and not keeping their promises. I think people are frustrated with that. I've talked with a lot of people who said they're tired of, oh, you say you're going to do this for us, and then I know you're just going to do something else. You're going to forget the people who got you where you are, basically. And that's, I feel, if we, as politicians, as people who are running for office, like I say, as a mayor personally, I'm a public servant. I see myself as serving the community, the people that I am over. And if more of our politicians, especially when money talks, care less about the finances, which is pretty idealistic to say, care less about the money, which has a huge influence, I believe, in our political system now, and which ties into the frustrations that they're now seeing money more, or people as dollar signs, pretty much. That's what I would say. Seeing people in the perspective of how they could benefit you. And I think they talked about that in the March for Our Lives with like Ted Cruz. They showed the dollar amount for each person, like how much a bullet is worth. It's like, are we worth, and I don't remember the dollar amount, it's like $1 per person. And I really, if politicians could care more and really genuinely, I think we've lost a lot of sincerity, especially in our political system. And if we could regain that, as idealistic as it sounds, we could regain that, I feel like people would be less frustrated with what we are doing. And if we would actually listen and be more responsive as elected leaders to the people we're over, that I would feel would be the best way to alleviate the frustrations that people feel.
Mm. Well said. Well said. Now, with the current racial climate in America, it seems as if there's more racial division than ever.
Mm-hmm.
So from your perspective, do you believe race relations are getting worse, getting better, or kind of staying the same? And as a mayor who happens to be Black,
Mm-hmm.
what could you do to help the racial division we have in our country?
See, when you say racial division hasn't gotten worse, I feel like it hasn't. Maybe it has gotten worse, but not in the aspect of it. I don't know how to explain that, of it not getting worse other than it's being more exposed. I don't know if that makes sense. I didn't know how to word that, but I feel it's being more exposed now. It's always been there. I think we've always had heightened racism, but it was just more covert. But with, like, especially with our recent president, that people are now being more bold, more open with their racism, racial divides, especially, again, with all the things you see with the shootings from the police officers and all of the, I guess, targeting of African-American lives, that's tying into frustration that ultimately leading to heightened tensions between races and leading to this divide. I think the main thing I would do as mayor, I would say by bridging the gap, is to make sure, because I feel the number one thing that contributes to it is the media and how there's perspectives of certain races and how they show them and what you see about certain races. If we could, I would say, let's see how I would word it, not expose, but show people the positives about each side. Like if we're talking about African American men, not all of them are criminals. Not all African American men are rapists and other stuff that they try to stigmatize us with. Trying to break down those barriers would be the first step to take, which is very difficult, I would say, but not impossible from how far we've gone. I feel like it just takes people wanting to know about other races, wanting to know especially how other experiences are influenced, how other people experience life other than themselves. And it takes the people, the person or groups of people or whoever you're talking to be willing to want to bridge the gap.
Sure. Yeah, and I'm an optimist. That's the lens through which I see the world. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I don't believe race relations are getting worse. But as I don't remember who said it, it said something to the effect of race relations aren't getting worse, they're just getting filmed. In other words, because of technology, we're now seeing things that, especially as Black people, we've been saying since we were brought to this country. So to me, that's actually a good thing, because it brings it to our awareness and we can no longer hide behind it as a country, that we need to look at race. So as an optimist, I see this as a good thing, no matter how uncomfortable it might make us feel at times. So when I see people like yourself who are moving forward to move the country forward with a man who happens to be Black, who wants to be a mayor or a lawyer, whatever you want him to do, once again, that fuels my optimism, because I recognize that the media is always going to showcase the negative stereotypes of any minority group. That's just the way the media works. And that's one of the reasons why I put together this podcast, because we can also control some media. We can also provide some positive stories. And the key is we have to be willing to not only share these stories, but also be willing to view these stories. So that's why I do what I do. Now, as a mayor, you are going to be exposed to obviously a lot of challenges. Without question, this country has lots of challenges. And so I want to talk about, just get your opinion on some of the challenges facing the world, not just DC, but I think they're all universal challenges. So first of all, one of the biggest challenges I think we have is mass incarceration.
Oh, yes.
And so that's an issue that we need to definitely address. And once again, as an optimist, I remain hopeful that that is something that is being addressed and more people are talking about it. So what's your point of view on ways of dealing with this issue?
Well, how much time do you have?
Let's get the Cliff Notes version.
Yes, I have done a lot of researching into mass incarceration. That's been one of my main focuses. So my main issue with mass incarceration, of course, most policies within the United States are inherently race-based, and we've known that. And mass incarceration, I feel, is a mechanism that is trying to destroy Black communities. And I mean that in the way that we talk a lot about how kids are not having the parental role models needed. They're not having that stability in their homes. And that a lot of times the father figure who is not there in their lives really contributes to a lot of frustrations that kids have. And you end up having kids who are exploding in the way of like their feelings. They don't really know how to manage that because they haven't grown up really where they felt loved or appreciated or attention. But I feel that it is contributed a lot. Mass incarceration factors a lot into that. Because if you look at it from that perspective, mass incarceration targets African-American males. We know African-American people in general, but specifically African-American males at a much higher disparity. So when we're incarcerating people, especially for minor drug offenses, especially minor nonviolent drug offenses, such as possession of marijuana, that should not warrant more than 2 or 3 years. But the biggest problem is the mandatory minimums and the mandatory requirements that the government has instated that really doesn't give the judges the authority. It takes away their authority to be able to give people I would say, here's a blurb. I forgot the word.
Okay.
What was I going to say? I lost my train of thought right in the middle.
It's okay. Judges don't have the authority to.
Oh, okay. Yes. Give the necessary jail time. For example, if the person individual only needs about 1 year and learns their lesson, but yet the mandatory minimum requires them to have 10 years, then we're automatically punishing someone. I feel we're punishing people for our fears. So you have a criminal that you say they're criminal, and the association stigmas with criminals, that they're dangerous inherently, that they can't be trusted, that they're a menace to society, and that fear is what I feel is keeping them incarcerated. Because I feel 1 or 2 years, especially if you're a minor drug offender, is enough. But because we create this depiction of what someone who is incarcerated acts like, looks like, that it feeds into our fears that keeps them in prison. And I feel that is the most detrimental aspect, and that's the biggest problem with mass incarceration. That is really just feeding off of our fears, and that's what's running the system.
Yeah, yeah, and again, that is an issue that we definitely need more time to dive deeper into it. But I think you've really summarized it well, because we need to remove this mindset, and especially for young men of color, that they're criminals. Because when they may commit a crime, but the inherent nature of them is good, and a lot of them have made mistakes, but our system currently labels them as such, and then the media continues to feed that narrative, and so we're viewed as criminals. And when you look at people of other races, the narrative is a little different, and the whole approach is different. So again, it's a topic that we definitely need to stay on top of, and I'm sure as mayor, that would be something that you would follow up on because you're so passionate about it. So let's jump to the next. You have another point you want to make?
Just one more point, especially as mayor. One thing I want to do with mass incarceration, well, tied in with that, is removing that box. You know, the box that ruins your life, I say. Because really what I say, once you're behind bars, whether you are physically behind bars or not, you are a prisoner for life because of that little box.
Right.
And that's one thing I want to remove from applications, because inherently there's going to be biases against that we need to remove. So they may not even be able to get a job, may not be able to get these resources, because automatically, once you see that box, you're automatically turned off. So that's one thing I'm trying to work on, is removing that box from the applications. So that's one thing I'm working on as a mayor.
Nice. Well, another issue that currently plagues our world is gun violence.
Yes.
And obviously with the recent shootings and the issues with the NRA's position on guns, it's a big issue. I mean, it's a big issue with no easy solutions. What are your thoughts around that issue?
See, I feel the gun violence, when I talk about it, I actually do tie it into mass incarceration again, with the lack of stability within homes. Like, I was talking about this with my mother, who's an educator, who talks a lot with kids who don't have that stability. And she tells me a lot of stories. And then what I've come to conclude is that when you lack that stability, support from your family, from your parents or your community, since we've lost that overall, that sense of community and sense of family overall, that if you don't get that support from them, you'll end up finding it from an external source like drugs, alcohol, guns, or gangs, in order to find that fulfillment or find that support, find that safety or something that you're not receiving from your family or from your community. I think that fuels a lot into gun violence, that we have a lot of kids who can't. Another thing, especially with African-American males, is that, especially with males in general, that you're taught not to express your feelings, to hold it all in, which is very detrimental, I feel, because what happens is that those feelings do build up, and then one day you will burst or explode if it's triggered in some way. And especially when we have the NRA, other organizations feeding guns, I say feeding as in mass producing, just so many guns are plaguing our communities, that we're really setting the government, I would say, is, especially the NRA, with the propaganda I've seen so many times, is like, you need more guns. We need more guns to protect ourselves from each other. And I think it's feeding into this false sense of safety from having a gun. That if I have this gun, I am more likely to, or less likely to be attacked, or less likely to be harmed. And then you start developing, I feel, a sort of dependence on that gun. And then I've seen a lot of studies that say once you have a gun, you're more likely to escalate a situation. So after you give someone a gun, a simple argument between me and you could turn into something much worse. If I say I get a little angry, but wait, I have a gun with me, and all of a sudden I use that, make the mistake, I shoot it out of, I'm a sociology minor, like I was saying. And we learned this was about 2 semesters ago, that with gun violence and the trigger bullet, I just forgot the statistic. Wow. See, this is not good. I totally forgot it. It was a good one too. Well,
That's okay.
I'll remember it later. Maybe at the end I'll tell you. But that was what I was going to talk about. There's a good statistic that I heard that I can't remember at the moment that really defined how gun violence influences the communities they're in to feel like they need more guns in order to keep themselves safe from each other. But then I feel, like I say, everyone with a gun, I would rather have no one with a gun than everyone with a gun. Because if everyone has a gun, we're all shooting each other, and that's all we're going to get to.
Sure. Now, another issue, we'll skip past the guns.
Yes.
Another
I'll
issue.
try to remember.
Our current president denies the scientific-based evidence that climate change is real. And in some ways, our government is actually supporting the destruction of our environment. So what's your stance towards climate change and environmental impact?
It's obvious that it's happening, whether they choose to ignore it or not. Like I said, it's worse that our government is choosing, especially our president is choosing to ignore it as something that is significantly affecting our world as it is now. And I would say there is a lot of changes going on just looking at DC, especially with the weather. You can see it where Texas snowed. Like it's crazy, like how much it's changed. I would say the weather, especially, you could tell it's obvious, and whether they choose to ignore it or not, that doesn't stop it from happening. It doesn't stop it. I would say it doesn't stop the fact that it's happening.
Yeah. And just because they're in denial of it doesn't mean it's real. And again, I think there's plenty of science behind it to support the idea when we start talking about polar ice caps melting, sea levels rising. So there's plenty of facts, which unfortunately this president tends to sometimes listen to, that support it. And I think it's one of those issues that as a world, we still need to find ways to maintain our environment and understand that we've only got one planet and we've got to take care of it. Next issue I want to talk about, big issue, illegal immigration. And the fact that our president and his cohorts are saying things like, or shall I say, justifying removing kids from their parents by using the Bible as a reference point for making those decisions. So from your perspective, what is your thoughts on illegal immigration and building a wall to separate us from Mexico?
Oh, I don't know if you saw it in the eye roll just now. I think that's his whole stance, and I think our immigration policy is we're missing the focus. What we're missing is a narrative. They're trying to create this depiction, create this stigma around them as coming, taking our jobs, and doing all of these other things against Americans. And one of the things I see is that they're missing the narrative of where these people are coming from. We are known, especially as America, as a land of opportunity, a land where you can express yourself. And I feel a lot of people seek that freedom, seek that those opportunities, and whether they are legally or illegally coming into the United States, I don't think that is our right to say whether or not you can come in. I know that in the past, when there wasn't a strict border, there are actually less people staying within the United States because they could travel back and from their home. Because most people come here in order to provide for their families back where they're from, or other narratives like trying to provide a better life for their families. So I don't think it is in our right to say that you can't look or at least search for that opportunity to have a better life. So when I don't see them as illegal. If you want to say illegal aliens, we're all illegal aliens, if you want to put it that way. like that's one thing they don't say in the media a lot. We all were immigrants at one time, except for the Native Americans. So why should we stop someone else who is trying to better their lives when we were moved here. Well, African Americans a little bit differently, but we came here especially to better our lives, especially a lot of immigration today. So my stance is I would allow them, especially with DC being a sanctuary city, that I do not have a strong stance against them. If they want to come and have a better life, if they want to be productive citizens of our American society, they want to, what is the word I'm thinking of? Contribute to our economy. I mean, I don't want to stop them from doing that.
Okay. Now, obviously, these are really big issues. With no simple solutions. And the fact that you're interested in becoming part of the solution by joining the democracy that we have in this country, by becoming a politician, by becoming mayor of DC, you're going to be faced with those. So I'm encouraged by your responses. I'm encouraged by your intelligence. I'm even more encouraged by your empathy, because I think those are the things that we really need from our politicians these days. And so I want to give you an opportunity to speak directly to the American people right now, because like I said, we've talked about some pretty big issues. So I want you to speak to the American people and let them know, or shall I say, share with them why you believe you would make the best mayor for Washington, D.C.
See, I believe I would make the best mayor because I'm trying to change this tone of politics. It really, as I was saying again, it's become every mayor for himself fighting each other, which ultimately does not get anything done. And that's the main problem, especially not only DC, but federally, that we have people that can't come to a consensus. And that's more detrimental than if you can't come to some sort of compromise. So I would say the biggest reason I would be the best mayor is because, again, that I do have that empathy for people. I do know how to connect. I am sincere with it. Like I say, politicians are the best actors. They could act like they care a lot. And that's what people do not want. That's what people do not need. You need people who are willing and able to go and actually be who sincerely care about what's going on and want to make a change, who are not in it for the title, not in it just for the money, not in it for these other things, but whose focus is on the people that they're representing and that they're over. And I think a lot of people, when they talk to me, especially too, from my personal experience, find it refreshing when I talk to them and I don't put on a show for them. I don't act like this. I don't act like that. Like, they see that I genuinely do care. And I think that's a lot that should tie in, especially for the American people, that they should know that if they elect someone to office, they have to make sure that they know that this person will have the best interest for them. And not let, again, like I say, not all people go in bad, but once money starts talking, it really does influence things. So to make sure that the people they elect don't fall into that trap of getting a little greedy on the people, losing focus of what they're in office for. And that's what I would say to the American people. Just know who you're electing and making sure that they are the best person for that office. And speaking personally for me would be just making sure that I do have the best interest for the people.
Thank you for that. That's what we need. Now, I want to sort of wind down here. And now I'd like to ask you to give a message specifically to young men of color, because we are constantly bombarded with all the negativity and the stereotypes of Black men. And yet when I see a young man like yourself who is, again, just really shattering the stereotypes, I think it's important for them to hear from you.
Yes.
Not me, not the old guys, but the young guys who are coming up. So I want you to give a message to those young men of color out there who may be struggling and may be thinking that, well, there's too many things stacked against me. I can't succeed in this country. What message would you share with those young men of color right now?
the main thing I would say is where there's a will, there's a way. And that we should not let, especially these stereotypes, these stigmas, hold us down to where we are. Because I see that as a sort of mental slavery. When you let what everyone's saying about you get to you, and you in turn internalize that and see yourself as not being able to get or do more than what you are currently at, I feel that's very, very impactful, especially in a negative way when you start taking that into account. What I would say is hold your head strong, and that no matter what people say to you, no matter how many people criticize you, no matter what they think of you, don't be afraid to express yourself, to express not only yourself as an African American male, but someone who is breaking the stereotypes, as you say. That someone who is going out and proving that we are more than what you say you are, and we're not going to let you tell us who we are. We're going to find that out for ourselves and not let any of the stigmas, any of the stereotypes hold us down from where we can go. And I want to say that if you think big, you'll do big. That's the main thing. If you know what you want in the future, if you have a goal you can envision for the future. If you have a will to reach it, there's nothing that can get in your way.
There you go. Be open to possibilities. That's what I like to say. Be open to possibilities. And so, all right, Michael, so we're going to wind down here. And now, how can people reach out to you if they want to make a donation or they want to, support your campaign? How do they reach you?
Yes. First, you can go to my website at www.mc4dcmayor.com. And they can reach me there. Send me an email. You can follow me on my social media, on Twitter and Facebook. Well, Facebook and LinkedIn at Michael Christian Woods. It's just my name. And then Twitter and Instagram at Woods for Mayor 2018. Woods, that's a number 4, Mayor 2018. And you can reach out to me. Again, I like talking to people, as you see. So if you want to send me an email, if you want to talk to me, anything related to DC politics or anything that you have going on, any issues that you're concerned with, any interest that you have, I want to hear it. Like I say, you have a voice and I want to hear it.
Fantastic. Well, again, I just want to say hats off to you, my brother, and thank you so much for shattering the stereotypes. I wish you all the success, and I'll definitely make a donation to your campaign because I'm really inspired by what you're doing and who you are. So again, thank you for that.
And thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
All right, so this closes this session of Shatter the Stereotype. So just remember, the key to changing the world is to not expect or not to act consistent with those negative stereotypes. So it is up to us to shatter them, and that's the intention of this program. So again, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next episode. Take care.